Braves and baseball fans, it's time to take a trip from coast to coast across Major League Baseball.
There it goes, a long drive. If it stays fair, home run.
One strike away. Sandy into his windup. Here's the pitch. Swung on and missed a perfect game.
Fly ball deep left center. Grissom on the run. Yes! 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 The Atlanta Braves have given you a championship. Listen to this crowd.
Left side, Swanson to first. Braves are world champions.
Braves and baseball talk, straight from the diamond.
Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer on your home today. And Window Nation. Call the pros at Window Nation at 866-90Nation.
Here's Grant McAuley.
Hello and welcome to From the Diamond. I am Grant McAuley. These are the Kia Studios of Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. And this is From the Diamond. And we follow up what has been a trend, unfortunately, on the day of Sunday, week after week after week for the Braves. We do this show with our fingers crossed that we're going to be talking about, and not just a win on a Sunday, but a series win for this club. And once again, we don't get to talk about either one of those today as the Braves fall to the Philadelphia Phillies in disappointing fashion by a 2-1 score and thus drop 2 out of 3 in a series that, stop me if you've heard this before, felt like a must-win for this club because they're all feeling like must-win, and they've been feeling that way for a while. And we're going to talk about a stretch of games the Braves just closed up, and we're going to talk about another stretch of games that's right out in front of the Braves on their road to the All-Star game, which is going to be at Truist Park, though several Braves, I think most of them, will have that time off to reflect, recharge, and get ready for that second half push. But putting all of that aside, it just feels like the opportunities have been there time and time again, day in and day out, and this is a club that has not been able to cash in on those, unfortunately. We're going to talk all about that. We'll talk about the week that was for the Atlanta Braves, the week ahead for the Atlanta Braves, and the half that was for the Atlanta Braves, because you might have noticed, if you're big into math, and I guess to some extent we all have to be. If you're into baseball, it's kind of all about the numbers. We're 83 games into the season. That means the Braves have surpassed that 81-game threshold. So a first half of baseball is done. And we're no longer talking about, hey, it's early. Is there still a lot of baseball left to be played? I guess it's subjective and relative. Sure. But there's not as much as there was. And each and every day, there's a little bit less. And that is working against a club like the Braves that now, after dropping 2 out of 3 to the Philadelphia Phillies, finds itself 7 games under 500, that finds itself staring way up in the National League East standings against a Mets team, and quite honestly, a Phillies team that have shown themselves in the month of June to be very mortal. But the Braves were not able to do the things they needed to do, by and large, to reinsert themselves into the power rankings, if you will, of the National League East. And that's part of the disappointment of a series like this. It's part of the disappointment of a season like this, quite frankly, a month like this at the very least, if we don't want to get too dramatic yet, because there is a lot of the season left to be played. But I think everybody's kind of feeling some kind of way, just waiting for this club to find what it is it's looking for. And what it is that this club is looking for, it's not a big secret at this point. It's consistency. It's consistency in offense. It's consistency in rotation and bullpen. I mean, that's the hallmark of a winning club. And for so many years, that has been the hallmark of the Atlanta Braves. It's not some big secret. You know, they're not coming up with a new plan. They're not coming up with a new way to win that's never been done in the 150-plus year history of Major League Baseball. No, this is a team that's just trying to find, I think, some of the little things to get those to go right, and those little things add up. Little things like getting runners on, getting them over, and getting them in. That has been an issue for this offense. Little things like being able to squelch the opposing team and stay away from the big inning at times. That has been an issue for this club as well. Though I will tell you, if you're breaking it all down to what area of the Braves it is that needs the most improvement, again, there are no secrets here. We've talked about this. We've done, over the course of this regular season, 13 Sunday shows. The Braves are now 3-10 on Sundays. Not that anybody's counting here on the show for the tone and the tenor and the overall enjoyment, I guess, of the show for the fans as well. But this is a team that has just not been able to get the job done. And they've got to figure out the ways to do that. So this weekend series against the Phillies, the latest in a series no pun intended, of must-win series for this team, and the offense came up woefully short yet again after what felt like, and again, stop me if you've heard this before, there have been some of these moments in this season that you just felt like, was that it? Was that the catalyst? Was that the switch? Was that when things were going to flip? Was that when momentum was going to get on the side of the Atlanta Braves? And then less than 24 hours later, you're kind of right back to where you started. It's a step forward and 2 steps back for this team, unfortunately. And the stretches of baseball I was talking about, a 13-game stretch that you needed to make some noise against National League East division foes. Now, I would say job well done against the New York Mets. You swept them at home. You split a tough series up at Citi Field. You wanted to get greedy. You wanted more. There's no two ways about that. But you won 5 out of 7 against what was then the first-place club in the National League East. And you continued what has been really a tailspin for the New York Mets. They have not looked good over the past 2 to 3 weeks. They had one of those vaunted closed-door players-only meetings trying to get themselves to figure out what's going on with them. Not that the Braves are sitting around doing a whole bunch of scoreboard watching, but the New York Mets have had some difficulties here over the past 2-3 weeks, and it kind of opened the door. Now, the Phillies, after winning 2 out of 3 against the Braves, have retaken the top spot in the National League East. They're 49-35 now with a 1.5 game lead over the New York Mets, who've lost 7 out of 10, and even more so than that, have had a lot of problems prior. But the Braves, 10.5 games back again. And then you flip over on the tab, wherever you're looking at the standings, and you're like, okay, well, what's going on in the wild card? Well, unfortunately for the Braves, they've got 4 teams in front of them for that final wild card spot. Obviously, 3 teams sitting in wild card spots, and then you got to consider the division leaders can bounce in and out of this race as well. So you're not really taking on 4 teams or even 7 teams. It's really 10 teams that you're kind of dealing with at this point. And the Miami Marlins, who have won 6 in a row and 7 of their last 10, are now just a game behind the Braves in the standings in the National League East. And if you don't want to hear me talk about the standings the whole show, I've got good news for you. This will probably be the only time that I do as far as the NL East is concerned. But as far as the trends and the direction of this club, the trajectory, there's a better word, it's just not there. And you cannot count on 4, 5, 6 different teams to lose to open the door for you day after day after day after day in the wild card. The math is not on your side. So there are more than one path, certainly, to October. And the Braves are trying to get on the path that will eventually lead them to that goal. But they've just been unable to sustain their momentum. You win 5 out of 7 against the New York Mets. Again, that was a thing of beauty. That's exactly what you needed. No one's saying you got to run the table. It would be nice to go on a long winning streak. There's no two ways about that. But you got the job done against that club. Then you lose a series against the Miami Marlins, a team that had not too long before that been swept by, let me check my notes, the Colorado Rockies. Now, baseball's weird. I'll stipulate. I'll give you that. Baseball is very strange. And any team can beat any other team on a given day. That's shown itself to be true time and time and time again, year after year after year. But that was a series that you had to win. You needed to go down there and win that series so that you could keep that momentum going. You go into New York, you win back-to-back games, you continue to, again, add to the miseries of the Mets. But then as you get into Game 3 and Game 4, you watched it kind of slip away from you. You had to settle for a series split. Splitting 4 games on the road against a tough team, though, more times than not, I'll say you can live with that. But you had to get the job done in 2 other series. It was the Marlins, and it was this weekend against the Phillies, and neither one of those series went in the win column for the Braves. They lost 2 out of 3 in both of them, and there are, of course, reasons for that. And at the feet of the offense is where you have to lay it to start with, because the Braves' offense has struggled time and time again, and Sunday was just the latest example of that in a 2-1 loss to the Philadelphia Phillies, where the Braves had their chances and just weren't able to come through. And Saturday kind of felt like one of those turning points. Again, to go back to that, the Sean Murphy Grand Slam. I think that got some people's attention. I mean, it was absolutely destroyed, that baseball. It was hit so hard and so far that it found a Phillies fan in left field who was excited to have caught a home run ball, even though it was a grand slam against his team. That was one of the craziest videos I think I've seen this season. This dude's wearing a Phillies jersey, jumping up and down, losing his mind because his team just gave up a grand slam. Well, it kind of is what it is, I guess. Maybe he just went with the moment, because it certainly was one where the vibe for the Braves felt like maybe something's starting to turn over, maybe something's starting to come to life. But unfortunately, It just seems to be another one of those just isolated incidents or isolated occurrences. An incident, it's a good thing, but it's not happening enough. So the real question is, are you going to be able to find more moments like that moving forward? It doesn't have to be a huge grand slam every single night, which, by the way, that was the Braves' first grand slam of the season. They were one of 7 clubs without it. Definitely appreciate Fox for flashing that graphic up there right before Sean Murphy obliterated that pitch. But we've talked about this on the show. The Braves are not getting home runs with runners on base nearly enough this year. Nowhere close to what they even did last year, and not even in the vicinity of what they were doing a couple of years ago. And it's baffling. And I'm going to talk to Brad Rowland of Hammer Territory a little bit later on about the Braves offense and just trying to make sense of a group of hitters in its collective primes, whether you're talking about Ronald Acuna Jr., who, by the way, looks pretty good, whether you're talking about Matt Olson, who has certainly heated up lately, whether you're talking about Austin Riley, whether you're talking about Ozzie Albies, whether you're talking about Michael Harris, whether you're talking about Sean Murphy. I mean, these are guys in their late 20s to very early 30s that should be having some of their best years of their career, and instead, last year began a decline, and this year, in some cases, has doubled down on that. But you have who you have. I mean, you're not going to be able to, and I know I've gotten a lot of feedback on this on social media, which, by the way, you can follow me at Grant McAuley on most platforms, and you can subscribe to From the Diamond wherever you get your podcast as well if you'd like to get in on the conversation there. I welcome it. I just don't have the answers for you a lot of times about why this offense has gone the way that it's gone for as long as it has been, because we're not just talking about a couple of bad months in 2025. We're not just talking about a couple of hitters in the worst slumps of their career. We're talking about dated all the way back to May the 1st of last year. So 14 months we're talking about. Throw the winter out because nobody gets to go on a heater and nobody goes in a slump in the winter because they're not playing any games. But you get my drift. This has been going on for over a calendar year. This is a Braves team that has ranked since May the 1st of last year, 21st in Major League Baseball in runs scored. They led Major League Baseball in ERA a year ago. They're not leading this year, but they're still, I think, by and large, at least a top 10 pitching staff. I don't want to say top 5. I'm definitely going to give them a top 10. And they've done it despite losing the likes of Chris Sale and Reynaldo Lopez and A.J. Smith-Shawver. 3 pieces of their rotation. By my count, that's 60% of the rotation that you've lost. And you're still figuring out a way because you've got a Spencer Strider and a Spencer Schwellenbach and a Grant Holmes. You're going to have to figure out the other 2 spots because, look, what you're running out there here lately hasn't really been able to take that baton and just continue to keep that momentum forward. But, you know, it's hard to replace some of the players, and the Braves learned that last year. But you were just hoping that from a health perspective that your offense was going to find its footing again, and it simply has not. And even though you got Ronald Acuna Jr. back, which I thought, no, this is going to be the moment or one of the moments where things start to just turn the other way. And Ronald Acuna Jr. has played like an absolute superstar in the 30-plus games that he has been back now. I think it's 34 games. And the Braves are 7-8 games under 500 with Acuna back. And one guy is not going to do it. But Matt Olson has also started to get things going the last 30 or so games. You needed to have that. But you're not getting much else. I got some stats to talk about a little bit later on. And I will talk, as I said, with Brad Rowland of Hammer Territory and kind of get his insights on some of this as well. You know, where do you go for offense? Because you can't go down to the minor leagues and replace 3, 4, 5 different hitters that aren't getting it done. I mean, you can change a couple of pieces, and I know people have asked me on social media, hey, why didn't Brian Snitker change the lineup? I'm not even trying to be rude or snarky. I look at the lineup every day, and I believe that he has changed it, at least on a pretty regular basis. But at the end of the day, like, he has who he has, and you're just not going to be able to move all these pieces around and find immediate results. But he has tried it, you know, changing the spots for a few guys, changing them on a regular basis for others. And it just hasn't been able to click. So there's just a lot of things that the Braves have to figure out offensively. We're going to dive into some of those on this show. I'll be joined by Brad Rowland of Hammer Territory a little bit later this hour to break down the first half for Atlanta and, of course, look ahead. And we'll preview the Angels series, which begins on Tuesday with Sam Blum of The Athletic. He will check in here on From the Diamond. But up next, we will get into this week in Braves baseball, the good, the bad, the downright ugly. It's coming your way. This is From the Diamond. I am Grant McAuley. This is Sports Radio 92.9 The Game and the Odyssey app.
Now, more From the Diamond with Grant McAuley. Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer from Mark Spain Real Estate. 855-299-SOLD. On Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back into From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. These are the Kia Studios. And it is the end of the weekend, the end of another series for the Braves. It was a bit of a bitter pill, to say the least, in a 2-1 loss to the Philadelphia Phillies, and 2 out of 3 go to the visiting Phils, as well as the Braves' 9-game homestand begins on the wrong foot. But there's been a lot of that going on for the Braves, unfortunately, this year, as they find themselves 7 games under 500 to close out the month of June. Just not where anybody, I think, envisioned this club being. Even if you were the most, I think, pessimistic about this team, and you could certainly, and some folks, I think there's a line between pessimistic and being realistic, and sometimes when something's bad, you just got to say it's bad. And the Braves' offense this year, I think we could say, by and large, as a collective, has been bad. It's not been good enough. And when you look at where it stacks up against the rest of Major League Baseball, and you look at where the Braves are in terms of record, you can point to the offense and say, more times than not, this is a group that is still struggling to get the job done. Another disappointing weekend. With a chance to secure a much-needed series win on Sunday, the bats were quiet again, and as I said, that has been the story for this team. The Braves were 22nd in Major League Baseball in runs scored in the month of June. Now, as I mentioned, opening up the show, I mean, this is a club that is, you go back to a year ago, May, so we're talking about 14 months ago. Since then, the Braves have been 21st in Major League Baseball in runs scored, a bottom third offense, after being the best offense, not just in franchise history, not just in Major League Baseball in 2023, but one of the greatest offenses the game has ever seen. So if you want to factor in some regression, hey, I'm with you. You want to knock 10 or 15% off of the productivity year over year? I get it. It makes sense. But you're not talking about 10 or 15% off the top between 23 and 24, and you're certainly not talking about 10 or 15% off the top between 23 and 25. You're talking about a 30, 40% drop in many cases for what some of these hitters are doing, and that is collectively, I mean, individually it's a problem, but collectively it's not adding up to enough runs for the Braves to win baseball games. Pulled a couple of stats. I apologize in advance for those. The Braves are hitting .236 in the month of June. That's 25th in Major League Baseball. OPS down around the same. And guys not named Acuna and Olsen were decidedly worse than that. So if you're looking at the Braves and saying, oh, they hit .236 last month, that's not good. You take Ronald Acuna Jr. and Matt Olson out of it, and then you've got a group that in the month of June is hitting in the 2 teens with an OPS in the low 600s. It's just been rough for this team. You look at the run-scoring trends. I wanted to find a few of those because we've talked about the one-run games until we're blue in the face this year, so I'm going to give those a break for this week, but I can tell you it's still been a problem. If you want to find the nitty-gritty of like where the Braves season could be decidedly different, winning one-run games would certainly fit that criteria. But Atlanta was 8-3 in the month of June when holding opponents to 3 or fewer runs, and that seems to check out. If the other team's not scoring very much, we should win some baseball games. The Braves have done that, 8-3. The problem is the Braves were held under 4 runs 13 times in 25 games in the month of June, and they went 1-12 in those games. So despite getting some very good pitching in some of those games, I'd say 5, 6 of those 13 games were winnable ball games. The Braves offense wasn't able to get it done. You've got to score more runs. And I'm not beating a new drum. I'm really beating the same drum, and in a lot of ways, I'm sure it probably sounds like I'm beating a dead horse with this. But this is what it is until it changes. They are who they are until they're able to figure all of this out. And being around the club, and I don't pretend to be a hitting expert, so I'm not going to give you any keynote speech about that. I don't pretend to have any particular experience with being able to hit Major League pitching myself. That's why I'm sitting here talking about it. I do enjoy the game, and I do try to learn from the game and from people who play the game and lean on what I hear when people are talking about the struggles and what it takes to get through the struggles. And some of the folks that I've had a chance to hear from, they just don't have the answers to it. I mean, Brian Snitker, prior to games, you ask him about the lineup, the particular change, moving this guy here, what will it take for this guy to do this? And it's just kind of, you just keep putting them out there because that's all you can do. I don't think it's a coaching problem per se. I don't know individually that it's the same problem for everybody. It's typically not. I mean, that's not how life works. I don't think that's going to be how it works for a baseball team either. But before I get all philosophical about it, I just had to ask Brian Snitker this week. I mean, look, 2023 was what it was. It was a great year. 2024 was its own thing. 2025 is its own thing. But you changed hitting coaches between 24 and 25 because Kevin Seitzer moved on to the Seattle Mariners and the Braves brought in Tim Hires. And Tim Hires, I believe, was a good pickup for the Braves. He brought in his hitting lieutenants. They have continued to work. So I was like, basically, size up for me if you can, to Brian Snitker, the job that Tim Hires has done and how challenging has it been to come in off of a season of struggle and to have those struggles continue to compound day after day after day. And he said, look, I think hitting coach is one of the hardest jobs in all the sports, and I would agree with him. I remember talking to Austin Riley way back in spring training. You heard it right here on this show. Hitting coach is probably the most difficult job in all of sports. And it's not for lack of preparation. It's not for not having good information. It's not for having good scouting reports. It's not for having a process prior to the game that doesn't get these guys up to speed and get them going. It's just not clicking. It's when you go up to the plate by yourself with a bat in your hand to face that pitcher on that given day. And look, I understand it's a hard game. It's a humbling game. It's a difficult game. But everybody's kind of going through it. And I do think that there's a certain factor of everyone knows it, and the interest is compounded on exactly how much pressure there is for some of these guys, and in just about every at-bat. I mean, Ronald Acuna Jr. is a different animal. Matt Olson, to his great credit, one of the hardest working guys on this team, has managed to figure things out. He's turned his season around. He's got a 30-game on-base streak. We're starting to see Matt Olson come through with the clutch hits, which I think I've heard other people on this microphone talking about. When's Matt Olson going to come through with some clutch hits? And he is. Sorry, I had to be very demonstrative there. I don't have a lot of special effects, but that's the one that I had. But I think that Matt Olson is going to be part of the solution. We knew that. And the Braves needed Matt Olson to start hitting at the rate in which he has really over the past 30 games. He's on basing at about a 400 clip. He's slugging over 500. He is driving in runs. He is doing his part, and he is playing a very, very good first base this year. So put him in the list of positives. But after that, I mean, you start to look through what the month of June was for the Atlanta Braves. Let me read you a few things. That was not a sound effect I wanted. Ronald Acuna Jr. hit .360 with 6 homers, just 12 runs knocked in, but he scored 26 runs in 26 games in the month of June. So Sunday was the 26th game this month. Matt Olson batted .313 with a .427 on base, slugged .510, drove in 21 runs, 10 doubles, 3 homers. After that, the only other OPS over 700, so on base plus slugging, was Drake Baldwin, and he batted .200 last month. Then you got Sean Murphy, Austin Riley, over 600 OPSs, Nick Allen, and then you kind of start to get into the real, crux of the struggling when you get down into the low 600 OPSs. Austin Riley batted .255 but had just 2 homers and 9 runs knocked in last month. Marcell Ozuna went into a deep freeze. Then you've got Eli White, who played an awful lot, but just 1 homer, 3 runs knocked in. Ozzie Albies batted .198 in June, no homers. Again, the home runs have dried up for him. In 26 games, only 6 runs knocked in, only 6 runs scored. So Ozzie, I mean, if there's been a poster child for the Braves' struggles, it's been either Ozzie Albies or Michael Harris, because way down at the bottom of this list is Harris, who was 13 for 88 last month. That's a .148 batting average. He has not walked since the middle of May. And the Braves are trying to figure out, and Michael Harris is trying to figure out a way to turn his fate around, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. But once you get outside of Matt Olson and Ronald Acuna Jr., even the guys that you expect, the Austin Rileys and the Marcell Ozunas, not getting it done. The catching between Drake Baldwin and Sean Murphy, I think, is more than adequate because of everything else that they're doing. But you'd like to have a lot more out of your left field situation, and maybe they'll get more when Jurickson Profar comes up. Profar continues. He homered again on Sunday, I believe. And he continues to rake down in AAA Gwinnett. But will he be able to make an impact once he makes it to the big leagues, which should be this coming week against the Los Angeles Angels? I believe it's July 2nd that he is eligible to come off of the suspension list. And we'll hear from Jurickson. We'll get a little insight on what it's been like the past 80 games, because goodness knows the team that he left, it's been a rough run over those past 80, that's for sure. But once you get through Olson and Acuna, not in that order, Acuna and Olson at the top of the order, The rest of this team is having all kinds of trouble stringing it together. And Austin Riley talked a little bit about this past week about where he's coming up short because not all his numbers are bad, but he said this, and I've heard this for 3, 4, maybe more weeks from him, is the damage is not there. You look at the overall stats, some of them are fine. But where are the power numbers? I think he's been looking for that. And I know that he said that his angle for his swing is not quite right. I heard Ken Rosenthal talking to him the other day, and Ken reported this in the game for Fox on Saturday, that just the angle isn't there in terms of being able to do that maximum damage, that his swing is just not quite right. It's shifted, I guess, is maybe the word for it. But either way, you got guys trying to work and figure these things out, and it's not easy to do that, make those changes, and get them going in a Major League Baseball game in the middle of a Major League season. And Marcell Ozuna, I'm sorry to say, has just become another member of this lineup, unfortunately. He's dealing with the hip thing. I think we all know that. He's playing through it. Batting a .175 over his past 25 games with just one home run. And he's only knocked in one run in the last 11 games. And this is a guy that you penciled in the last couple of years for at least 30 and 100. And he's been better than that. But now Marcell going through it as well and physically is part of it. But I don't think anybody has taken it on the chin quite as much as Ozzie Albies and Michael Harris. And with Harris, he finally was taken out of the lineup this weekend. I think they're hoping that that will be at least a mental and maybe partial physical reset for him, because you just had to do something at this point, because his June, easily the roughest of all. Batting a .148 in 26 games. His last walk, again, came on May the 18th. He walked 2 times in that game. And he has not walked 1 time in the last 35 games. And that's just one of the craziest stats of all of it. But when you watch it, I don't know if it's just swing decisions. I don't know if it's just pressing. I don't know if it's the lack of pitch recognition. There's a lot of different questions about it. And it's not an easy thing to sort out in the middle of a season. But for Michael Harris, this is the time. But for the Braves, I mean, what kind of discussions can they really have about this? When you don't have options to replace guys, and spoiler alert, even the best teams, you can't replace 5 or 6 different guys at one time. It just doesn't work that way. Maybe getting Jurickson Profar will help out. And is that the time where the Braves finally look at it and say, would it benefit Michael Harris, who has options, to go to AAA? I've been asked that question a ton in the past 3 weeks. My initial read on it was, no, I think that defensively he's valuable, and offensively, based on the last couple of years, he's always figured it out. Because typically he has started slow and had a very good second half. And now we are in the second half, so I don't know if anecdotally that'll start to click for him. The engine will begin to turn over a little bit more regularly. But it hasn't happened to this point, and I think as you look at what you're not getting in center field, offensively speaking, what you're not getting out of left field, offensively speaking, and what you're not getting out of shortstop and second base, that is 4 different spots in a lineup. And let's go ahead and throw Marcell Ozuna in there, as much as it pains me to do it. You're not getting much out of your DH spot either. That is 5 of the 9 spots in a lineup, and I challenge you to find any team in baseball that can make it work when you've got that many guys down that bad for that long. It just doesn't work out that way. Can the return of Profar be something that allows the Braves to reimagine their lineup? I'm going to withhold judgment. I'll be, I guess, cautiously optimistic about it. But again, as I said with Ronald Acuna Jr., and let me point out, these are 2 very different returns. One guy is not going to fix it all. You got to get multiple guys going in the right direction, and you got to have it starting as soon as possible. We'll talk a little bit more about this with Brad Rowland coming up here. He's going to join me to discuss the first half for the Atlanta Braves, which has been a mixed bag at best, a disappointment at worst, and frustrating, I think, is pretty universal. Brad Rowland of Hammer Territory joins me next on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game and the Odyssey app.
Now, more From the Diamond with Grant McAuley. Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer from Mark Spain Real Estate. 855-299-SOLD. On Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back to From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. We are live from the Kia Studios on a Sunday night here as we continue our Braves discussion and talk about this week in Braves baseball, a Braves team that is closing out the month of June, turning the calendar to the month of July as a 9-game homestand continues this coming week. And to help me talk about some of the biggest stories and the biggest concerns perhaps going on for the Braves, as it were, is Brad Rowland of Hammer Territory. You can subscribe to that podcast wherever you get your podcast. You can also find Brad on a variety of other platforms, as he is, without a doubt, one of the busiest men in Atlanta sports media. Well, Brad, good to have you on the show. I know this has not been the easiest of times this year, but we do get to talk about baseball on a regular basis. It's just, you can't pick what happens in the baseball that you're watching on a nightly basis. But I appreciate you making some time to chat with me about the 2025 Braves, one of the single most frustrating teams in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe this season through the halfway point. Perhaps they have time to turn it around still on the bright side, but certainly has been maddening at times.
This has been, I think, again, a fascinatingly frustrating club in a lot of ways, because now they're mathematically halfway through this season. I think we know what they've been to this point, unfortunately. The great question remains, can they improve? And that is not rhetorical. I think there are ways that they can improve, and we'll get to those later, but I don't think anybody had a sub-500 first half with a double-digit deficit in the National League East standings, with the suddenly red-hot Marlins breathing down their neck heading toward the month of July, but here we are. So let's start big picture with your takeaways on just where they are, and then we'll get into the changes that need to happen to get them perhaps back on track, over the hump, and all those good things.
Yeah, it's certainly not been what anyone could have expected. If you bake in the injuries they've had, maybe it's a little bit more reasonable. But even then, even if you told me what the injuries were, I probably would have projected more victories to this point than they've been able to kind of eke out. And perhaps there's some solace to be found in their run differential, which is solidly positive right now. No one is banking on that as far as being super positive about the team. But I think it's, if you want to look at the underlying data, it's a little better than the actual record. Still, though, I think just a lot has gone wrong in a similar way to what happened last year, but even in a more punctuated way to last year. And it's been the offense. We all kind of understand what the deal is there. They just haven't been able to score runs as consistently as they kind of need to. And they've done a pretty good job of run prevention. And that's what's keeping them kind of afloat right now. They're still near the top of the league in run prevention, and against all odds, with all these pitching injuries and everything else, they've been able to do that. But when you don't score, it's hard to win.
No, it definitely is. And I've talked about this some on the show, because when you look at the one-run losses in particular, and you look at the run differential like you just brought up, I mean, you could really break it down to about, 15 runs this year, maybe less now, that could be the difference in the Braves being 5 or 6 games over 500, and them being where they are heading into the midway point of the season and the calendar about to turn to July, and still needing to get themselves on track. Now, we don't live in a what-if kind of scenario here, but it does tell you how close they are, and why I think that Alex Anthopoulos, Brian Snitker, the players themselves, have continued to believe that they are a better team than their record suggests. But when you get inside the numbers, those can be pretty frustrating, and we will get to that in a moment. But you brought up the injuries, and losing Chris Sale was a particularly cruel blow for this club, and they dealt with losing Reynaldo Lopez and A.J. Smith-Shawver in their rotation already. But Sale, I don't want to overblow this by any stretch of the imagination, but he's kind of the competitive personality of the club. It's pretty hard to take him out of the picture for this team for any amount of time.
It definitely is, and like you said, it compounds with the absences already that they have. And look, I don't know if this is borne out in all of the WAR numbers or anything like that, but you could certainly make a coherent argument he's been their most valuable player since the day he arrived. When you factor in how much time Ronald Acuna missed, Ronald's the best player on the team. We all know that, but he wasn't around for most of last season and all that. So if you factor that in, Sale has probably been their best overall player in the last 2 years. And beyond that, just his impact, like you said, I mean, you're around the clubhouse more than I am, but it's one of those things where everyone seems to swear by the guy, super competitive guy and leader and all those things. And you don't want to overstate that, but also it does matter behind the scenes. So hopefully he's back sooner rather than later. Lots of, as you would probably expect, some general uncertainty about his timetables, but not having him there at the very least is going to hurt them and puts them in a really bad spot, because honestly, the depth of the rotation was already kind of a question mark, and now it's a screaming one at this point.
Chatting with Brad Rowland of Hammer Territory. He joins me on the WadeFord.com hotline here on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. Now, the offense has been nothing short of a disappointment. Outside of Ronald Acuna Jr., Matt Olson, Drake Baldwin, and sometimes maybe a fourth hitter in there that's producing that particular week, it's been a baffling year for the bats. I mean, that's the best way that I can put it. It's added up to Atlanta being in the bottom third of Major League Baseball in runs scored. Again, I was expecting a bit of a bounce back, especially with Acuna's return to start to energize this lineup again. And it is a lineup full of all-stars who should be in the primes of their careers. So, Brad, I guess the question I'll ask you is the question that people ask me all the time. What gives with this club, and when are they going to start playing up to their talent level and ability again?
Yeah, that is the million or multi-million-dollar question, we could say, for Alex and the decision makers with this team. Because without going player by player, you're right. You named the three guys who you could say are having good or better seasons by their standards. It's Ronald, it's Matt, and it's Drake Baldwin, who's been obviously great for a rookie in particular.
Yeah.
And there's been moments of other guys. Moments of Ozuna earlier this season. Moments of Murphy. Riley's not been embarrassing. Like it's not a disaster, but like there's too many nights when there are 4 or 5 guys in the lineup that are carrying just hideous numbers over large portions of time, and some of that is your hands are tied. Like, for instance, you're talking about guys like Michael Harris and Ozzie Albies who are signed and core pieces of your team, and it's hard to like do too much, from the outside to say, all right, just bench this guy. Well, it's not that easy, and also you have to have replacements for them. It's hard to do that. You don't suddenly have just guys waiting in the wings. So there are questions anytime this goes for as long as it's gone. I mean, it's been since last season. The offense has been a disappointment. It's a lot of it's on the players, but also it's on like, all right, what's the approach? What's the question? Some of the downside, I guess, of maybe having your entire core locked in or most of your core locked in is like maybe your optionality is less when this kind of happens. So I wish I had the magic answer for you, Grant. We're all looking for it. We're all talking about behind the scenes too. We're trying to figure this out, but I don't really have it for you.
Yeah, I can't say still, and maybe I'm just stubborn, that locking up what should be a talented core of all-stars for the better part of a decade to play together and to hopefully do something special was a bad idea on its face. Now, what's happened the last couple of years, again, like you just said, I don't have the explanation for it. I just look at the talent that they have collected and think they are capable of more. The question is, how are they going to get back to that? We talk about this every single day, and we finally saw it on Saturday. Michael Harris, who's been the poster boy for the deep freeze slumping players, I'll call him this year, his numbers have cratered this season. He took a seat on Saturday night. I jokingly answered one of the tweets that spelled out 6 different scenarios that Harris could be suffering from. I wasn't really sure that any of them necessarily fit the bill for him, but I'm no closer to having the answer as to why it's gotten this bad for Michael, and more importantly, how he fixes his swing or his selectivity at the plate. The bottom line is, Brad, though, I do think it's reached a point where some different discussions are obviously going on, and some others could probably happen in the not-too-distant future, just based on where Michael is at this point and the fact that you've got to start to do something different, right?
Yeah, you have to, and I thought that was probably the right move to give Michael a day or two, or however long they want to do on this. Like he still has minor league options, so that seems like a nuclear option, but that might happen too. You're exploring, and I try to give Michael in particular a longer, benefit of the doubt, because he does bring other value in a way that not everybody does. Like, he's a very good glove in center field. He can run. The baseline for what he has to do at the plate to be a productive player is lower than a lot of guys, but he's been below it this year. I'm sure he knows that. Everyone understands that. And like you said, it's not just like a physical thing. It's like a pitch recognition thing, and that's what it's almost harder to discuss on the outside. It's like, you could diagnose the swing, but it's kind of what pitches he's swinging at, and that's a much harder thing to talk about, honestly, in a way that we're not in the batter's box every day. But that's his primary problem. So it's like, does a day off, does 2 days off fix that? I kind of doubt it, but maybe it's just a clearing of the head, and that will give him a fresh start. But obviously, they can't live with this, and he is one of those guys, like we talked about, that's signed for a long, long time, and it's not a crazy amount of money on an annual basis. But if this is what he's going to be, then it's obviously a problem. So, and I'm sure they know that. And again, there's still time to correct it.
Yeah, there is. And I really don't feel like, they're necessarily looking to just pull the nuclear option, out of their bag of tricks and hit it if they have to. But I do think if Harris goes down, it's going to coincide with Profar returning from suspension, if they're going to do that, because they've got to get at least one more steady outfielder going. This outfield, outside of Ronald Acuna Jr., is the worst in Major League Baseball from a productivity standpoint. And obviously the disappointment with Profar, which will get a second go at what exactly he might be able to bring here in the second half. Some things have gone wrong for the Braves clearly this year. Now, Ozzie Albies is the other bat that is consistently fighting it at the plate here. I've never thought there would be a scenario where the Braves would not exercise his $7 million options. I'm still not convinced they'll do that, since they have to pay a $4 million buyout. why not take a $3 million flyer and try to figure out if you can get your all-star second baseman who's been a fixture for your club and is still in his 20s back on track? I don't know if it's a wrist issue. I don't know if it's a pitch recognition issue for him as well. He's always been an aggressive hitter, but he's been a guy who's made it work, even if he doesn't light up the StatCast page. But this year, it has been all over the place, really. I mean, there's been some swing and miss. There's been a lot of pop-ups, a ton of that, ton of bad contact, and a ton of early in the account, overly aggressive Ozzie Albies that we've seen. And then all of a sudden, it seemed like maybe he was going to start drawing walks, which was an interesting twist, if you will. But bottom line is, I mean, I am hearing it whispered a little bit more that the Braves have a bigger decision to make with Ozzie Albies. It's not one they're going to make here in season, but it's a multi-layered and complicated situation. Where do you land on Ozzie? What's been going on with him? And obviously, what do you see as the potential for his ability to get his career back on track? Because it's been off track for a minute now.
Yeah, of course, the unsexy answer is let me know what happens the rest of the season when it comes to the option with Ozzie. Because if this is the same player he'll be in the second half of the season, then it becomes a much more challenging decision. You're hoping that he bounces back a little bit. He's only 28, but he also is probably an older 28. He was up early. He's obviously such a small player. I mean, everyone knows that, but perhaps he would age less gracefully than some because he's been so reliant on his tools because he is so small, and that compact swing and having the power he's been able to generate at that size has been kind of awe-inspiring, honestly, at times. But that's not been there this year. He's come up 2 years ago, he hit 33 home runs. Right now he's on pace for 12 or 13 for the season. That's a different player playing every day. So, like you say, he's never been a great StatCast profile kind of guy, but it's gotten worse there. We've been joking behind the scenes, like, perhaps he doesn't want to walk. Maybe he's better when he doesn't walk. Like, I would never say that about anybody, but maybe, I mean, I'm kind of tongue-in-cheek here, but perhaps that's maybe even more aggressiveness from Ozzie might be something that's better, because he's always been a free swinger. So we're all kind of guessing, but you're right. There are some signs at times of life from Ozzie. He has not been as shaky as Harris has been, but considering that, it is honestly crazy that we would even be entertaining the option decision, because like that was such a heist of a contract from the team side. We all know that, and it has been to this point. But this is not a $7 million player that he's been this year. That's kind of the long and short of it.
All right, let's jump into the second half. Underway, mathematically speaking. All-Star break is ahead. What can we expect from the next few weeks, really month of July for this team, because they have this long homestand they're on, then a quick two-city road trip before the break. Athletics and Cardinals, the two teams they'll see out there, so should be interesting. Cardinals, obviously, a little bit more competitive club, but in the run-up to the All-Star break and really the month of July, Brad, what are you looking for from this team? My answer to people has simply been just win series, because if you win series, you put yourself in position for Alex Anthopoulos, I think, to really go out there and consider doing the buying that you know he wants to do. You continue to lose series, however, it's going to be a very, very interesting trade deadline for the Braves if they aren't able to get this thing righted over the next month.
Yeah, the margin for error is gone. That's kind of the way I've been framing it. It's not that you can't fix it. It's just that you can't stack series losses. I'm big on the stacking series wins thing. I know that's a Braves trope for years and years and decades, but it's also true because it works out that way. If you win 2 out of every 3 games, 3 out of every 4 games, you're in pretty good shape. This is going to be, it's kind of sound fraught right now. This team has not been the best at beating teams that they're quote unquote supposed to beat, and the rest of the schedule until the All-Star break is not littered with those teams, but none of the top teams in the league are on the schedule the next basically month, at least the next 3 weeks or so until the All-Star break. Opportunity is there to make a little run here. You're talking about 2 more home series, then you face the A's, who are better than they were a couple years ago, but they're nothing special. Like it's a winnable stretch here, but also you kind of have to start winning. I mean, we can make as many comparisons as we want to previous seasons where they started slow, but you have to eventually turn it on. That's kind of what I've been saying for, it feels like 6 weeks now.
Yeah.
But you have to have one of these stretches somewhere. And it's unfair, but it's just that's the hole you dug, where you win 14 out of 17. Like you kind of have to have one of these big runs to kind of get you back where you need to be. And it hasn't happened yet. Perhaps it's going to happen now. But if it doesn't, you're walking that tightrope if you're Alex about like, do you buy and do you sell? And that'll be a conversation that's going to keep happening until they kind of prove that they are certainly going to be worthy of buying.
Yeah, and Alex has obviously been out there in the media trying to, I think, send some messages to everyone in general, but also to the club that, like, look, we're not giving up on you guys, and we're going to try to do something, but right now is not the greatest time to trade. And I've heard it all over the place. I mean, it's going to be a seller's market, I think, as far as the trade deadline is concerned, especially now that the postseason has expanded. That may not necessarily open the door for some clubs that we know are obviously not heading there, but it might change the prices of the things they decide to trade and when exactly they want to do it. Why make an early trade when you can wait and get clubs to potentially pay more when they're a little bit more desperate? So a lot of math that will go into that, I'm sure, on the front office side. And unfortunately for the Braves, they just kind of had their backs seemingly against the wall at times this year where it's just felt like their season is on the brink. And I look at the calendar and think, wait, it's April. Wait, it's May. It's June. Now we're in July. So, I mean, we're a good ways of the year is now behind us. A good portion of the season is now behind us. But, man, it has been just a frustratingly baffling season for the Atlanta Braves that has been consistently inconsistent. Maybe that's the best way to describe it. Brad, tell everybody about Hammer Territory, what you guys are doing, and how folks can get connected with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. As always, we cover the Braves at Hammer Territory 4 or 5 times a week. We're pretty busy on the show, sometimes overly busy. We might go long every once in a while on some certain topics, but Hammer Territory, anywhere you find your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc., with myself, Scott Coleman, Stephen Tolbert, and Sean Coleman. We have a good time, and occasionally I might even get the great Grant McAuley to join us on the podcast. He's been willing to do it in the past. We'll do it on our show at some point, Grant, but I appreciate you having me as always.
Absolutely. Let me put this out there, too, a ringing endorsement. If I subscribe to your Braves podcast, you are doing something right. I do subscribe to Hammer Territory. I appreciate the insight and your time, Brad, as always.
Thanks, Grant.
He's Brad Rowland of Hammer Territory. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. When we come back, we will turn our attention to what else is happening across the world of Major League Baseball and hit some of the biggest stories from around the big leagues. It comes your way next on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game and the Odyssey app.
Now, back to more From the Diamond. From the Diamond is brought to you by Window Nation. Get 2 windows free with every 2 you buy and pay nothing for 2 years. Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
This is From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game, live from the Kia Studios on a Sunday as we turn our attention to what else is going on around Major League Baseball. Can't cover it all, but I like to find a few stories to, I guess, delve into some of the biggest headlines from the week. Hopefully, they will add a little bit to the show in terms of the fun factor, but they can't always, because sometimes, life deals us a curveball. And life, I think, dealt Dave Parker quite the curveball, obviously, this week. The loss of the former Pirates and Reds and Athletics, Brewers, Blue Jays, and Angels great. I believe I got all the teams there as he passed away just prior to his upcoming induction into the Baseball Hall of Fame. Of course, Dave Parker, one of, I think, the all-time great players for the decade of the 70s into the 80s as well, a fearsome slugger who was also quite the outfielder, had quite the arm. If you want to go find some highlights of a well-rounded five-tool player, what it looked like in the late 70s, Dave Parker was probably the guy, one of the best to ever do it. And condolences to the Parker family, of course, all the organizations and his friends across baseball who I think were heartbroken for obvious reasons, but also knowing that this was just the cusp of having that defining moment of being inducted into a Hall of Fame. And it's not the end-all, be-all. And it's a shame that it took this long for Dave Parker to get in, if we're being honest. But some of the tough news from this week, of course, that leads us off here on our trip around the big leagues. And Parker's teammates, the Hall of Famers, current Pirates as well, all reacted to his passing and called him one of the best to ever do it as far as the Pirates are concerned. 19-year Major League career. He, of course, battled Parkinson's for the last 15 years and ultimately lost his battle there. Parker elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame in December by the Classic Era Committee. He will officially be inducted into Cooperstown on July 27th, so about a month shy. Pirates and Reds, among the teams who Parker played for, expressed their condolences. The Athletics, Angels, Brewers, and Blue Jays also, in addition to Major League Baseball. And plenty of former teammates threw in on this, as you might imagine. Hall of Famer Burt Blyleven, a sad day as my former teammate and friend, Hall of Famer Dave Parker, passed away. He fought Parkinson's for years. Our condolences to his wife, Kelly, his family, and everyone that had the great opportunity to be with him. Rest in peace, Cobra. And let me point out, Cobra, one of the coolest nicknames in all of sports. And when I was at the winter meetings this past December, when the Classic Era Committee voting results were announced, and it was Dick Allen and Dave Parker who were inducted, I was standing just to the side of the MLB Network setup for that broadcast and making that announcement for who was going to get in, and I was standing right by a lifelong Pittsburgh Pirates fan wearing a gold Pirates late 70s uniform It was number 39, and on the back, instead of it saying Parker, it said Cobra. And he was just had his fingers crossed. So I talked to him for a couple of minutes just about, the excitement that he's obviously feeling and the hopes that Dave Parker would be announced as one of the inductees. Seeing him get that news right there, because he traveled a long way just to be there, just for the announcement. That's how much Dave Parker and the Pittsburgh Pirates meant to him. And that's, I think, part of the beauty of baseball. But Parker will be missed by the baseball world that played with him, played against him, and can just appreciate one of the great all-time players. And Dave Parker certainly one of those. And one of the things I thought was interesting is I was going through a lot of the response and the reaction to Parker's passing over the weekend was that Nick Gonzalez, who is currently playing for the Pirates and wears number 39, has said that it meant a little bit more to me today to be playing with that number, and I think it should be retired, and I should get a new number, honestly. And that might happen at some point, but for what he did for the community, it's an honor just to wear this number on my back. And I would imagine that at some point the Pirates will hold a nice ceremony to honor Dave Parker and retire that number. Hopefully that will be the case. And again, condolences to the Parker family, the baseball world in general, and just unfortunate timing to not be able to be a part of that induction, though it isn't everything. It certainly would have been nice to see Dave Parker get that kind of recognition because he certainly deserved it for his outstanding career and his courageous life as well. Moving on, the Home Run Derby is taking shape. That'll be happening July 14th here at Truist Park as the Braves are hosting the All-Star Game this year. Ronald Acuna Jr. accepted his invitation, announcing on SportsCenter on Wednesday. I'm super happy to be competing in my third Derby, even more so to be doing it in front of the best fans in baseball in Braves country. Super excited, gives you a tremendous level of confidence from all the fans who are there supporting you. So Acuna will be in his home ballpark in a place where, if you've ever watched this kid, if you've watched him hit at all, but if you've watched him take batting practice, he hits balls in places at Truist Park where I did not know baseballs could be hit. So it should be a lot of fun to see him competing. As far as some of the other contestants or combatants, if you will, for the Home Run Derby, the field is still taking shape. Only 2 confirmed names thus far. A couple of guys have turned down the opportunity. I'll get to that in a moment, but one who seems likely to turn it down, should he be invited, is Dodgers great Shohei Ohtani, who said after the game against the Royals on Saturday, after which he had started and thrown a couple of scoreless innings, he would likely not participate in the Home Run Derby. Ohtani said, with the current rules in place, I don't think it's feasible for me to be able to compete well. Ohtani has only done 1 Home Run Derby. You might remember it was back in 2021. He went head-to-head with Juan Soto. They had an incredible round. He was eliminated by Soto by a 31-28 final score in that round. And Ohtani, who was coming back from Tommy John surgery, the internal brace, a year ago, turned down his invite last year to be part of the Home Run Derby, as his rehab was going to be the more important thing that he was concentrating on at that time. And now one man who will be part of the Home Run Derby field is Cal Raleigh. He is the Major League home run leader, not something I thought we'd be talking about, not because he doesn't hit a bunch of homers, but because he's hitting them at a record-setting pace for a catcher. Raleigh has just crushed his way towards this Home Run Derby bid for him, hoping to become the only catcher ever to win the Home Run Derby. That will, of course, be happening on July 14th. The Mariners backstop announced on Friday. He'll be competing in the event. The cool thing, I think, for Raleigh, in addition to just being part of the event, is the fact that he will not only have his dad, Todd Sr., throwing to him for the Home Run Derby, but his brother, Todd Jr., will be the catcher, which I think is a pretty cool deal. 15 years old is Todd Jr. He'll be behind the plate catching for his dad, and Cal Raleigh, who is going to be looking to make that home run history, might do something that we've only seen one other time in a Home Run Derby, and that is switch hitting. Adley Rutschman did it a couple of years ago. Cal Raleigh has hinted that he might pull that out of his bag of tricks and do some switch hitting to be a part of the Home Run Derby. So we'll see how that all plays out. A couple of names who have declined invites to the Home Run Derby: Teoscar Hernandez of the Dodgers and Ellie De La Cruz, the star shortstop for the Cincinnati Reds, as well, will not be a part of that. A couple of other stories to turn our attention to. Unfortunately, another one you hate to see. Ketel Marte went through a lot this week as he was showered with love in his return home after an ugly incident with a heckler in Chicago. Marte was playing against the Chicago White Sox, and a heckler decided to take it to a place where you just don't need to take it. If you pay your money, you want to boo people, cheer people, everybody gets it. But when you make it personal, and maybe you don't understand just how personal you've made it, it has crossed a line. And that is exactly what happened with Marte, whose mother had passed away in an accident in 2017, and a fan on Tuesday decided to heckle him by bringing up his mother, who had since passed away. You may have seen video of this. Marte got incredibly emotional on the field, got a lot of support from his teammates immediately, and manager Torey Lovullo of the Diamondbacks made sure that that fan was immediately ejected, and he has been banned for life. Marte did talk about this on a podcast and said that people always yell at me, but never about my mom. People know my mom passed away in an accident. Major League Baseball did a great job. The Chicago White Sox did an amazing job as well. Torey Lovullo said, I just appreciated they followed their own protocol, which is to eliminate the stimulus from the stadium, and the security guards were able to take that fan out and show him the door, and rightfully so. We've seen a lot of these crossing the line kind of things, or more than we've needed to see in recent years, and hopefully things like this will just remind people that there are things that are bigger and more important than just your in-the-moment feelings about a particular sporting event, and I'll put that off to the side. Let's take a visit to SNY in New York as the Braves and Mets were battling in their 4-game series. Steve Gelbs, who is the sideline reporter for the Mets, brought in, I thought, a pretty fun piece of color that you may have never heard before. The Pitchcom has been a big part of baseball. You see the catchers and pitchers communicating with it throughout the game now, but what does it sound like? Let's take a listen to SNY because they gave us the goods.
You know, guys, one of the things that we talk about often over the last few years has been the Pitchcom. And honestly, we started thinking we've never heard what the Pitchcom actually sounds like until now. Here you go.
Four-seam fastball, curveball, slider, changeup, sweeper, cutter, sinker, in, away, up, down.
So there you have it. That is the default English setting for the Pitchcom. You hear that it's not just the types of pitches, but they also call pitch location. There is also a default Spanish language Pitchcom. The one difference, though, is that all of the pitches, all of the locations are in Spanish except one. It still says sweeper in English because there's no word for sweeper in Spanish.
Do you know if there's a Japanese version?
So there is not a default Japanese version, but you can program the Pitchcom to say anything you want. You can record into the Pitchcom. And so when Kodai Senga first came over here, they asked him if they'd like him to record Japanese into that Pitchcom. And he said no, he does it in English.
Wow. Do we know who the default voice of Pitchcom is?
So I asked that question. They did not know the answer, but they thought that it might be the creator of Pitchcom, who is the default Pitchcom voice.
I have a theory that it might be the default voice from that old speak and spell thing that kids get when they're learning sounds and how things are pronounced and words and whatnot. But I don't know that that's necessarily true. But pretty cool to hear that. That's the little earpiece that the pitchers have. And you notice that the catchers have the coordinating buttons usually on their knee or on their shin pad where they'll push everything through and let them know what to throw and where to put it. Technology. Isn't it exciting? When we come back, we will continue our trip around the big leagues, but we'll bring it back to Truist Park. It's the Los Angeles Angels who are coming in. We'll talk to Sam Blum of The Athletic, preview that series coming up on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game and the Odyssey app.
I love baseball.
Now back to more Grant McAuley and From the Diamond. Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer from Mark Spain Real Estate. 855-299-SOLD. On Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back into From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game, live from the Kia Studios on a Sunday as we close out the weekend for the Atlanta Braves. And we're actually going to take a little bit of a look ahead of what's to come for the Braves as the Los Angeles Angels will roll into town on Tuesday to start a 3-game series against the Braves. And to help me preview that series and catch us up on all things Angels, I want to welcome Sam Blum of The Athletic into the program. Well, Sam, I appreciate you making some time to join me as the Braves and Angels get set to meet for a 3-game set at Truist Park. I would guess, just based on the team that you cover and the team that I cover, there's going to be some commonalities in the players between these two clubs, and I think that'll make for kind of a fun series. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because, coming into the season, everyone thought the Braves would be, a World Series contender and the Angels would be where they were last year, which was, at the bottom of the AL West standings. And, they're probably a little bit closer to each other than the Angels are currently ahead of where the Braves are. So it's interesting. And it'll be, like you said, there's a lot of familiarity between the clubs. There's a lot of overlap on the coaching staff, player side and the front office. And the last time the Angels went to Truist Park, it was right after the trade deadline, I think, in 23. And, that was right when they decided not to trade Shohei Ohtani. And, 2 years later, they're trying to kind of rebuild from that mistake. And it's so far working, I think.
Yeah, no, they have definitely taken some strides this year. And I know in a perfect world, you probably would have liked to have been able to keep Ohtani around. And that was probably the big plan for the Angels at that time. But as these two clubs meet up this week, and I want to get our series preview and some insight on how everything's going in Anaheim, but I do want to start with Ron Washington. To say he's beloved in Atlanta would be putting it pretty mildly, and I think that's the case probably wherever he goes. We're hoping the best for Wash, but we did hear the news this week that he is taking medical leave for the rest of the season. Can you share a little bit about his situation and how all of this unfolded in recent weeks?
Yeah, so when the team was in New York about a week and a half ago, the last game there, he just wasn't really himself. His voice was weaker. He wasn't moving as, spryly as he typically does. And I think that gave a lot of people with the Angels pretty significant concern. So when they got back here, they had him see a doctor and just ruled him out indefinitely at that point. But I thought, there was some hope that it would only, talking to Wash a little bit, last week, his belief was this would be a fairly, quick turnaround for him. But, he was not here throughout, the latter three, I think Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday they played here. And he wasn't at any of those games. And, he came back Friday and they shared that he was just not able to return this season. I think it's, I texted with Wash a little bit through this. He seems like he's in good spirits. I think from what I've heard, this is not something that, it's very, very concerning, but I think they believe that they caught something early. I don't know exactly what he's dealing with, or certainly can't share that, without any sort of permission. But, I think that they hope that he can get back. Perryman Ozzie said Washington knows what he needs to do in order to get healthy, and I just hope he's able to do that. I think everyone, like you said, I've loved working with him. Showing up to the ballpark and seeing Ron Washington every day is what makes it enjoyable, honestly. And so on a personal level, you just pray that he's okay and that he gets back healthy. And whether or not he ever manages again, I think is very secondary to him leading a healthy and happy life now. And, certainly hope that that's what happens.
No doubt about that. Well said. I echo that. And I'm sure a lot of folks across what we refer to as Braves country down here would certainly like to send their well wishes to him as well. Now, just kind of turning the page to the big picture, the 30,000-foot view for LA this year. A solid season and a very nice month of June that has the Angels in striking distance of a wild card spot. I guess just a general question, what's been going right lately for the Angels?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of everything. They're not really dominant in any category. I mean, if you look, their starting pitching is okay. I think their bullpen has been a lot better recently. That's probably been the number one thing when you look at, late May to where they are right now, approaching July. That's probably been the biggest change, is just that bullpen is really locked in and been quite good, honestly, after about 6 weeks to start the season where they were arguably the worst in the entire sport. Mm-hmm. So I look at the bullpen as the big change, but even there, it's not like they've got a ton of lockdown arms. They don't have a ton of lockdown arms on the rotation. They have used the same 5 starters throughout the entire year. We're the only team in baseball to do that, which I think has probably helped, keep some consistency, not have to, I know you look at the division, the Houston Astros who are in first place, they've had to churn through a ton of starters. So it's interesting that, the Angels, I think, been able to stay above water because they've kept those guys healthy for the most part. And, they're hitting a lot of home runs. When there are guys on base and they're hitting home runs, they're a lot more effective. And they're starting to draw some more walks. They've still got one of the lowest on-base percentages in the sport, but they're getting on base more than they were. Joe Adell's had an insane month. I mean, probably the best month of any hitter in baseball at this point outside of maybe Kyle Raleigh. You got to give him some credit for what they're doing. And Nolan Shonwell's been good. Mike Trout's gotten back healthy and been, not amazing, but, serviceable, I would say. And, they're just kind of piecing together wins. They're winning a lot of close games, and they're in the mix. They're a game out of a playoff spot right now.
Yeah, you throw all those things together, and that's kind of what the Braves are looking for, honestly, is the guys to get on base more. They could hit some more home runs. You kind of thought there would be more of that this year. And then on the pitching side, I mean, it's no small thing to have that consistency. I think the Braves are a club that would very much like to say, hey, we've only used 5 starters this year and gotten the ability to have that consistency there. They're trying to piece it together. But from the outside, in the last few years, it's been hard to watch Mike Trout deal with so many recent injuries because I don't need to tell you, this is one of the greatest players we're ever going to see. And I know he wants to be out there, and this year has had some challenges as well for him. We all get older. This is the age 33 season for Trout. Have you seen him change the way that he approaches, whether it's preparation or maintenance, for lack of a better word, to kind of put himself in position to be on the field as much as possible?
Yeah, I mean, right now he's just not even playing outfield, and I don't really think there are a ton of steps being taken to get him back out in the outfield, which is interesting because, as Braves fans know, the Angels also have Jorge Soler, who's expected to come back in a couple days, and also, as Braves fans know, he's not much of an outfielder, so I think the concern is already how you're going to navigate needing, all these potential DHs while Zach Neto is also kind of in a position right now where defense might be more of a concern if he could swing the bat. So, so I think they would love to have Mike Trout be able to play the outfield right now, but he's not able to. So I think that's kind of, to answer your question, like he's staying healthy by just like really just DHing and doing what he can to keep his bat in the lineup. That's the priority right now. But he talked last night. He said he was still sore. I mean, that's just, in his knee. And I think that as he's aged, right, like it's not been the most graceful aging we've seen in baseball, right? Like he's had some problems with that. And I think there's also been some mental roadblocks for him at times, just getting back and like, feeling like, if he's not fully 100%, should he be playing? And like, it's just, I think getting older has been tougher for him than maybe you've seen for other players and other superstars even. But he's playing, and I think he's been he hit the game tying home run last night, so in the 7th inning. So he's not been terrible. He's just not really been Mike Trout either. I think we're at the point now where you got to start asking, like, what does a peak Mike Trout look like? Is that, I don't think it's an elite superstar right now, but I think he can be a really good major league player. It's just a matter of, him figuring out what that looks like and everyone kind of being comfortable with it.
Yeah, it's all kind of part of the process, and aging players that clearly have high expectations of themselves, and I don't know that you could set the bar much higher than Mike Trout set in the first half of his career. So kind of getting over that hurdle has to be, I guess, part of the calculus for Mike Trout from day to day. Chatting with Sam Blum of The Athletic here on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. He joins me on the WadeFord.com hotline as we look to preview the Braves and the Los Angeles Angels, who will begin a 3-game series on Tuesday at Truist Park. One other player you also brought up that I think has kind of gotten the attention of the baseball world this year has been Zach Neto. I think this has been a breakout season for him, pretty safe to say. He'd flashed the skills before, but what has gone into the step forward that he has made this year?
Yeah, I mean, he's just a really great all-around player. I mean, it's, he's got speed, he's got power, he's, ability to kind of change the game in a lot of different ways. He brings some sort of fire. I mean, he's basically created 2 bench-clearing skirmishes already with Tarek Skubal and Hunter Brown, like 2 of the best pitchers in the American League. I just think he kind of likes those moments. He likes facing the best competition. He likes kind of being on the field. And I think when you look at the future of this team, he's the face of it in a lot of ways, him and Logan O'Hoppe. O'Hoppe's had, in my opinion, a pretty tough season outside of some of his power numbers. But, I look at Zach Neto as maybe like the best player on this roster right now, top to bottom, in terms of his defense, in terms of his offense. He's just got to stay healthy. I mean, the shoulder injury at the start of the season and now kind of being re-aggravated, I think that's, that you don't want to have chronic issues when you're a Major League Baseball player. That's the kind of thing that can totally derail an entirely, really great, young, promising career. So, if I'm the Angels, I would be very careful, very cautious about getting him back out here in the next couple days. If he needs an IL stint, give him an IL stint, because, it was concerning watching him throw the ball the other night after he'd injured his shoulder again, and, it just didn't look good, and they need him. But, yeah, in terms of, like, he's been like this, really, I think, since he got called up. Like you said, he's been better, but he's, I just think it's a little bit maybe making more contact, a little bit cutting out some of the strikeouts, and just power numbers are up a little bit. But for the most part, I mean, he had a really good year last year, and he's just kind of continuing it now.
Yeah, and good to see, and certainly as you're looking to build a club that would like to have some consistency, continuity, and some contention in its future, you need players like this as well. The Angels, with all these familiar faces I mentioned, Perry Minasian and Alex Anthopoulos know each other very well. Obviously, they've hooked up on a few trades. Perry has also picked up a few other Braves along the way. One of the things that I think that does, and this is just kind of my read on it, is it accomplishes a couple of things. Obviously, you want performance on the field, but it also seems like the experience and the history of winning and having some big moments is something you want around a club that's just dying to get a chance in October from a cultural perspective.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you. The Angels have really surprised me this year. I didn't really love everything they did in the offseason, and I don't always agree generally with their approach about roster building and what I would kind of characterize as a refusal to rebuild. I don't really think they were doing, last year I don't really think that was a rebuild. I just think that was a really poorly constructed team that performed really badly amid a lot of injuries. And, to me, like, you look at the deadline, you look at I still believe that if the Angels are not like really in a playoff spot come the end of July, they should still be looking toward the future, because what you're seeing right now is some of these young players come along, perform well, and there's an opportunity to really build something here if they capitalize on it. Just like with Ohtani 2 years ago, at that same time when the Angels were in Atlanta, they didn't trade him, and they ultimately really paid a pretty steep price for that in a way that, right now they could be one of the best teams in the American League if they had made some of those tough decisions, I think. But Yeah, it's just you're right. I think that they're trying to build some sort of culture. I think when you look at Perry, like he wants guys that have been there. He wants guys that have had success in the big leagues. I think that some of the budgetary constraints lead him to maybe make some decisions that, okay, we're going to get some guys that I think could do something, but maybe didn't do it last year or only did it for a portion of last year. You got to take some risks, and I think right now some of those risks are paying off. But for the most part, what's carrying them are, guys that came up here and that are young players that have come through their own system. I mean, you look at that Soler trade they made with the Braves. That was not a good. That trade's not paid off. I mean, Soler has not been good. He's not been healthy. Griffin Canning ended up being quite good for the Mets before he got hurt this week. So, I mean, it's not like a lot of their decisions over the offseason have been great, but I do think that they've maybe put together a team full of guys that kind of have a certain mindset and a way of going about it that has worked for them.
Yeah, and it is interesting. I mean, hindsight gives us a whole lot of insights on, the way that we could have done things and maybe how it would have played out with the Ohtani deal in particular. I feel like that was the most unique of situations because I wouldn't want to be the GM in that seat, number one, trading away arguably the most talented player of this or maybe any generation. But as you pointed out, what could have come back in return was at least a conversation, and I'm sure there were probably conversations that happened.
Oh, yeah.
But what did it come down to? Was it Perry's reluctance, or was it an ownership reluctance, or is it a little bit of everything?
Oh, it's ownership. I mean, I think Perry would have traded him. I do. I mean, it's you can have your criticisms of Perry, but I think at the end of the day, he's not. He's a smart person. He understands what you get for Ohtani. Is at the end of the day, I mean, they were banking on what I believe was like a 15 to 20% playoff chance in 2023 with a roster that just wasn't really there to win a World Series and they didn't really have any intention, I think, of signing Shohei Ohtani beyond that season. I mean, it's just they weren't willing to match what I believe to be a very reasonable offer that he ultimately signed with the Dodgers. And, you look at what the Dodgers have done with Ohtani, and, he's already repaid his entire contract, I think, in a lot of different ways. And so it's interesting. I mean, I think at the time it was a more controversial decision. I was always very much in the belief that, if you're really in the mindset of winning here long term, you have to make some tough short-term decisions, maybe none tougher than that one. But they've put themselves in a position now where I think people have moved past it a little bit. I look at that as an all-time mistake. But if they can, get into contention quicker than people hope, there's a lot to forgive there. And, right now they're a game out of a playoff spot, and they got a month to kind of show what they can do, I think, to the front office, to ownership, that, to give them a chance maybe to make a playoff run for the first time in 11 years, which is something this fan base, I mean, Braves fans are spoiled in a lot of ways. I mean, they get a beautiful ballpark. They go to the playoffs almost every year. They get compete for championships. But out here it's just like it's desperate for anything. And right now they've got a little bit of something to cling on to, and I think it's quite meaningful for the fans here.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And they say winning cures a lot of ills. That goes for the team. It certainly goes for the fans as well. Sam Blum of The Athletic, I appreciate all of your time. Look forward to seeing you at Truist Park this coming week. And the Braves and Angels will meet on Tuesday to begin their 3-game series. And look forward to chatting with you then.
Of course. Thanks so much, Grant.
When we come back, we will turn our attention back to the Atlanta Braves, who closed out the weekend against the Philadelphia Phillies, and we will look ahead to the week to come, which includes not just the Angels, but also the Orioles, who will pay a visit to Truist Park as the homestand continues. All of that and more is coming your way right here on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game and the Odyssey app.
Back to Grant McAuley for more From the Diamond. Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer from Mark Spain Real Estate, 855-299-SOLD on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
This is From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. We're live from the Kia Studios, wrapping up this weekend's edition, wrapping up the weekend in general, a weekend, unfortunately, of disappointment for the Atlanta Braves, who lost 2 out of 3 to the Philadelphia Phillies, are now 7 games under 500 as they close the month of June and need to find some momentum as soon as possible as they head into July, where they'll continue a homestand, which we'll talk about a little bit more in depth here in a moment. Of course, you heard a lot about what's going to be going on with the Los Angeles Angels, who are rolling in to start that 3-game set on Tuesday, from Sam Blum of The Athletic. A lot of great insight there. If you missed that for whatever reason, I invite you to simply go to wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe to From the Diamond right there. You can also find the replay on the Odyssey app, so a couple of different ways for you to catch up on that and every edition of From the Diamond as well. So if you are so nice as to subscribe, it would also be great if you leave a review. We always appreciate those. With all of that out of the way, though, let's talk a little bit about some other things going on for the Atlanta Braves, things that could help them as they look to find that consistency that we talked about way back when we opened up the show, and also just lay the foundation for the winning that they need to be doing at the rate that they need to be doing it. The starting rotation is getting its biggest test of the year at a time in which the Braves simply have to win games and win series, and they got to do it quick because they need to turn this season around. But Chris Sale being out, that places, I think, more pressure to be perfect on other starting pitchers. At least I think that's the outside view of it. But talking to different guys about where the, I guess, transitive property of responsibility for picking up where somebody else has left off because they're out, I don't know that necessarily has to be that way. It shouldn't be that way. I mean, it's not about being perfect. It's about just going out and doing the best that you can do with a given day and that opportunity. I think a little bit smaller rather than really being consumed by the big picture of, hey, there's no Chris Sale. What you need is for Spencer Strider to go out and do the kinds of things he did on Sunday, which was 7 innings of 2-run ball, which I know the Braves lost by a 2-1 score. But when you're getting starts like that, that is the foundation for the winning. It's the run scoring that's going to happen, and it has not. Now, Spencer Strider, again, with 7 innings against the Phillies on Sunday, allowing just the 2 runs. He did his job. Even though he said after the game that he didn't do his job, it's still a good start. And a good start is where I think it all begins for this Atlanta Braves club to set the foundation to win a baseball game, and he's been doing that. And you certainly needed to see it, and it's not all about just Spencer Strider, who may have the most name recognition, name value, if you will, in this rotation outside of Chris Sale. But what he's been able to do here lately has to have you feeling a lot better just about his general trajectory because, you know, it wasn't too long ago that Strider had lost his first 5 starts, and now he's turned around and won 3 out of 4, and the way that he's done it, I think, has been what really impresses you and what you needed to see from him. The velocity starting to tick up. The command of the secondary pitches is also there for him. Those were steps along the way to the recovery from the elbow surgery that cost him all of last year and, you know, had him on the shelf to start this season as well. You just needed to know that Spencer Strider was making those strides, and he is, in fact, doing that. Now, someone else who's getting the job done and then some is Spencer Schwellenbach. I mean, he is making a bid, I think, very easily to be one of the National League's all-star pitchers. And I heard a little bit of conversation about it in the broadcast yesterday on FanDuel Sports. I think it was C.J. Nitkowski who was talking about different staffs, or maybe, no, it was the Fox broadcast, so scratch that, and I'll let CJ off the hook here. But they were talking about the fact that there are other pitchers having good seasons, and yes, there are, and there are going to be a number of all-stars who are going to have to bow out of the game because they are going to pitch right before it happens and won't be available to pitch in the All-Star game itself, one of which would be Chris Sale. I don't see any reason why Chris Sale would not be an all-star, but as you, me, and everyone else knows at this point, unfortunately, he won't be able to partake in that particular set of festivities, but maybe Spencer Schwellenbach sliding into that spot would be the way that needs to go because he has been, I think, everything you've needed him to be in his sophomore season. And I think there was maybe some concern that he was going to go through that sophomore slump when he had some good starts followed by some really questionable starts, but as you look at it right now, I mean, this is a guy that just continues to get it done. 17 starts this year, that leads the National League. He's 7-4, 110 2/3 innings. That leads the National League. He's striking out about a batter per inning. He's not issuing walks. He has had a little bit of trouble with the long ball, but I feel like he's kind of course-corrected all of that. And when you've got 6, what I would say, very, very impressive pitches, 6 pitches that you can really lean on, it gives you kind of a unique skill set. And Spencer Schwellenbach, certainly that. Strikeouts to walks, he leads the National League in that as well, as he's 6-1 on the strikeouts to walks. I mean, that's just another thing inside the game of Spencer Schwellenbach that he does extremely well. That's command the strike zone. But I feel that how he got back on track was making the quality pitcher strikes and getting hitters off balance and getting hitters not to be expecting and just waiting on Spencer Schwellenbach to be around the plate, because there is a big difference, as we talked about, between hitter strikes and pitcher strikes. And I think that Schwellenbach's doing that extremely, extremely well. Then there's Grant Holmes, who has quietly fortified this rotation all year long. I mean, he just continues to go out there and show that the Braves' belief in him and giving him this opportunity was well-founded. I think that Grant Holmes, while he won't put up the numbers of a Chris Sale or a Spencer Schwellenbach or a Spencer Strider for that matter, this is still a guy that has done, by and large, I think, everything the Braves could have asked and then some .370 ERA, 16 starts on the year. He's pitched 90 innings. He's struck out 103 batters, so 10.3 strikeouts per nine for Grant Holmes is among the top 10 in the National League. I mean, one of the best strikeout rates for any starter in Major League Baseball is Grant Holmes. Now, the flip side of this is he has had some command issues, I feel like, but he does a nice job of not allowing damage for the most part because he doesn't allow as many hits. Home runs from time to time, sure, those have bit him as well, but 42 walks on the year, that leads the National League. That's a total I know he'd like to whittle down. But overall, I think you'll take this from your fifth starter when he's going out there and giving you the kind of outings that Grant Holmes has been. But that leaves Bryce Elder, who was just blasted on Friday night. And that's the third straight bad start for him after that gem against the San Francisco Giants a few weeks ago. And the last couple of outings, though, I will say this, and I was talking about this with Brad Rowland, who joined the show earlier. You know, I'm not trying to be a Bryce Elder apologist, but I was curious about the usage decisions for him, but I know there's a lot of calculus that goes into that. Rather than having him start, say, Game 1 against the Marlins, he got a couple of extra days rest, and I don't know if Bryce Elder is the kind of pitcher that I want to give too much time between starts because he does kind of rely on precision. When it comes to Friday night, easily one of the worst outings of the year by any Braves pitcher. A 13-0 loss to the Philadelphia Phillies. There was nothing good about it. It was, as good old Jim Ross would say, bowling shoe ugly. But for Bryce Elder, he went out there and went through the paces of getting ready to start a game at 7:15, and then he got a 2-hour-plus rain delay. But he still started that game. The Phillies, meanwhile, they did not feel comfortable putting McAuley out there to start the game. Went with a bullpen contest, and wouldn't you know it, their offense came to play. They beat up on Bryce Elder, and the Braves offense couldn't get anything done for really the second consecutive game in a bullpen environment. Because if you go back to the finale against the Mets, Griffin Canning unfortunately hurt himself in the third inning, and the Mets bullpen just picked right up where he left off and kept the Braves bats quiet. And that's kind of been the story of the season. But putting all that aside, the numbers have been pretty bad for Bryce Elder. And this kind of gives you gets you wondering, I'm sure, what other options are available there. Because with no Chris Sale and with A.J. Smith-Shawver also out, what can you do to plug another hole in rotation when you've already brought up a 20-year-old in Didier Fuentes from one start in AAA, but mostly AA this year to fill in your rotation, hoping that it was kind of, I think, an arm talent, lottery ticket, catching lightning in a bottle, if you will. I mean, they got to figure that out. But Bryce Elder's last three starts, 10 2/3 innings, 25 hits, 5 of those home runs. He's walked 8. He's given up 18 earned runs. It's just been a brutal run for Bryce Elder. I can look at the last couple of starts and feel like, well, maybe there are some circumstances that weren't great coming in, but ultimately, and he'll tell you, and he has said it after this, I mean, there's no accountability dodging for him. He's got to be better. And for the Braves, they've got to figure out a way to get better in that rotation with Chris Sale out in particular. And I don't know if that means Hurston Waldrop, who picked up a win for the Gwinnett Stripers on Sunday. I know the Braves have had, I think, some developmental focuses for him to get the walks under control and get him on track and not throw him into the fire. But if you're going to bring up Didier Fuentes, who's 20 years old and has 7 starts at that point above A-ball, maybe you should entertain the opportunity for Hurston Waldrop, even if it's not the ideal situation, because guess what? A lot of these things have not been the ideal situation for the Braves. But what to make of things beyond Didier Fuentes, who's viewed as your best option to start Major League games? It's a dangerous game to play. And it goes back to, what do the Braves need to get better? Well, to score more runs. That would help. But in terms of what they could go out and get tangibly, what Alex Anthopoulos could have on his shopping list, once you lost Chris Sale for what is presumed to be weeks and weeks, your need for a starting pitcher may have vaulted to the top of the list. Because what you need out of the lineup is the guys that you know to start hitting better. Jurickson Profar coming back could help as well, and maybe you look for some other way to fortify a position, whether that be shortstop or left field or whatever the case may be. I don't think any stone's going to be left unturned in terms of trying to figure out what exactly you can go out and canvas for, but I also believe it's going to be a bit of a seller's market. So do the Braves have the capital that they need to go out and outbid some of these other teams for what I would say are the desirable pieces that could be moving? And there may not be a ton of pieces if certain teams ahead of you, especially in the wild card, even though they've had a tough run of it, like the Diamondbacks, for example, if they're hanging around 500, they're not going to sell. I wouldn't imagine that they would be motivated to sell anyway, even though they've lost Corbin Burns. And even though Corbin Carroll is hurt, I still just don't view them as a big-time seller. And I could be wrong, but that's just one example. And then when you start to look at other teams, yeah, there's a couple of nice pieces here or there on some of the clubs with worse records and some of the worst records in baseball, but not many. And you know that other teams, other contenders are going to go out and try to raid those cupboards as well. So can Alex Anthopoulos get that done? And really, this, I think, is kind of the biggest point is the Braves' most crucial time of need to get help is right now. Unfortunately, it's right now at the start of July. It's right now in the run-up to the All-Star break. It's in the games well before you get to July 31st. So the onus is on the team and the 26 men on any given day that are currently the Atlanta Braves active roster to go out and win some baseball games so that they are in a position so that they can do some buying. Because otherwise, it's a really, really difficult situation for a general manager to be in if you're hanging around 5, 6, 7 games under 500, approaching the trade deadline with 6 or 7 teams ahead of you in the final wild card spot and 10 or more games between you and a division, first place in the division. That math ain't mathin', unfortunately. Elsewhere, Dylan Lee, I think, has made a pretty serious impression here this year and could be a guy who's counted on to pitch some of the biggest innings in the bullpen for the rest of the way. And by biggest innings, I mean the 9th inning. We've seen Raisel Iglesias, I think, look better over the past week and a half. He's had some moments here or there, but better than it was, certainly. But I don't think the Braves have gotten to the point where they're ready to slot him back in that closer's role, which leaves opportunity there. And Dylan Lee, we watched what he did against the New York Mets this past week, against Juan Soto in particular. I think he showed you he's capable of some big things. So maybe that's a lefty that can help you out. And the Braves can also get some assistance from Daysbel Hernandez, who is on the mend now and began his rehab assignment with Gwinnett on Sunday. A scoreless inning for him with 1 strikeout. He threw 12 pitches, a lot of 99 and 100-mile-an-hour fastballs. So if you were wondering about that arm, it was forearm inflammation for him. He had the kind of that numbness in the fingers when he landed on the IL about 3 weeks ago. Looks like Daysbel still got that powerful right arm, and that would be a welcome sight as the Braves try to get their bullpen house in order, get their rotation in order, and then ultimately have the pitching staff do what, for the most part this year, it has done for you, which is keep you in baseball games. But what's ahead for the Braves is a long homestand, which continues with the Los Angeles Angels, who are then followed by the Baltimore Orioles, another struggling club. So that represents opportunity. Obviously, you want to win your games at home. The Braves have been pretty good at doing that. Afterwards is a trip to Sacramento to play the A's, then a stop in St. Louis against the Cardinals. So by no means is this an overwhelming stretch. But the Braves are going to have to do better in this 12-game stretch ahead than the 7-6 record they just posted in 13 games against the Mets, Marlins, and Phillies. 12 games for the Braves to really decide their fate in a lot of ways. The season hangs in the balance. It's teetering, to use another word, ahead of the All-Star game, which is here in Atlanta. We'll be talking a lot about that, of course, and we'll be talking a lot more about the Atlanta Braves when next we meet, which will be next Sunday, as this edition of From the Diamond has come to a close. I want to thank Brad Rowland of Hammer Territory for joining me, Sam Blum of The Athletic, and my producer Josh for all the great work today, and all of you guys for listening to From the Diamond. As always, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcast, find it on the Odyssey app, and I'll be with you next Sunday. Until then, I've been Grant McAuley. This is Sports Radio 92.9 The Game and the Odyssey app. So long, everyone.